They would blockade the roads, and people would die. Young children that were in the buses would die. The protesters wouldn't even let the elders or the pregnant women or the children go by. And that is wrong. That is not human.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to our last event of the term. Time really flies by. Now, I think we saved the best event for last. I will be introducing the Honorable Martha Beatriz Merino, who's a Peruvian lawyer, academic, and politician who served as the first female Prime Minister of Peru in 2003. She previously served as Senator and Congresswoman from 1990 until 2000. Following her tenure as President Alejandro Toledo's cabinet leader, Merino was appointed by the Peruvian Congress as the National Ombudswoman for Peru, serving from 2005 to 2011. Having retired from politics, Merino has now transitioned to academia and currently serves as president of the Cesar Vallejo University since 2016. Let's give a huge round of applause for our honorable guest. So to begin our first question, let me first pour some water for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So to begin our first question, you became president of the Council of Ministers on 23 June 2003, which made you hold the highest political rank ever held by a woman in the history of Peru. Can you tell us about what that means for you and any barriers you faced to rise to your position? And we just had International Women's Day, so I think this is a great segue.
Thank you. Well, I left my career at the private sector, and now we can talk about that a little later. And by the time I decided to enter politics and public service, I started by Parliament. So I spent like 8 years in Congress first and Senate as well. And then as I was preparing myself to do my PhD, which actually I wanted to do at Oxford in economics and philosophy at the time, I was called by the president of my country to become the prime minister. And I knew this was going to happen the day before, in the afternoon of the day before. And as I usually do when I face these situations, I went home and I started thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And I really wanted to do my PhD, you know. It was like my dream to do a PhD at Harvard. And not at Harvard, at Oxford.
Oxford.
I did my LLM at Harvard, yeah. And at one point, like at 2 o'clock in the morning, or maybe between 2 and 3, I said to myself, in 200 years, this job has never been offered to a woman. And I am not going to be the woman that says no. And so then I went to sleep. So the next day when the president called me, I was kind of chuckling with myself because he went on trying to convince me. I was looking at him and said, just say it, I'm going to say yes anyway. So what did it mean for me? I felt very comfortable. I was very happy to put everything that I had in, from my studies, from my jobs, from everything that I had at the time developed in favor of my country. And believe me that I was saying that I belong to a generation that left the comfort zone of having most of its problems already solved. And part of that career, you know, was in the executive branch. And I'm very happy because I think I kind of opened the way. There have been 5 more female prime ministers since then. I feel so proud of myself. We're friends of all of us. And so I think that now it's your time. So I hope a lot of the ladies here and the men as well become presidents or prime ministers of their countries and can change the world for the best. That's what I think. Oh, and by the way, my country grew and had a stability that still has. The macroeconomics and the investments in my country are, okay, suffered a lot of things, the pandemic and everything, but it's stable. It's a stable country.
I have no doubt that we do have some future leaders in this room. But speaking of that, when you stepped down as Prime Minister of Peru, you actually had very high approval ratings. So can you illustrate to us the reasons why you decided to take that early departure from your role back in 2003? Was this because you wanted to leave and pave the way for other women to come in, or was there another reason why?
Well, when I left as a Prime Minister, I went first to work in an international institution, and then I was called to become a constitutional authority, which is the ombudsman, which requires for at least 2/3 of Congress for approval, a lot of consensus, which is very hard to find in politics. And I made the decision. I spent 5.5 years there, my mandate. After that is that I decided to leave. And why? Because I do believe that I spent 16 years of my life, of the best years of my life, serving my country. And I said to myself, that's good, that's enough. I gave the best of myself that I studied when I was in England, that I studied when I was in the United States, that I studied all over the place, and I worked so hard. And now it's time for other people. And so I can always be there, like a more reserve, like somebody that will come out and give an opinion or lead the way, or, But I think that it is not good when you think that you are the only person that can do it. I think that it's good to have other people, young people, to come and do their contribution. And it is a very interesting time of your life when you become a mentor. When you become a mentor. If any of you want me to become their, I have my cards. I'll give you my cards. You don't need to, I don't need anything, I don't want anything. But if you're going to write an email and say, what do you think? What's your advice? Oh, I'll be more than happy. I have I think 5 or 7 persons that have worked for me that have been members of cabinet. Wow. I always laughed with myself. I say I'm better than a public school, And I have deputies, I think 15. So I feel very proud of myself that I changed. Yeah. Instead of being myself, the one, I identify them, I make them grow, and then I sit back and I enjoy it so much.
Well, I actually want to circle back to your role as the ombudswoman. And you were ombudswoman of Peru for 6 years, but you were widely praised for avoiding partisan politicization while providing robust human rights reference points in political discourse. So can you kind of talk about trying to balance, being a spokeswoman for human rights, trying to avoid partisan politics? Can you kind of talk about that struggle?
Yes. Well, first of all, in all the jobs that I had, I was also the head of the Peruvian inland revenue here for Texas. Yeah, I was the head of that also in Peru. Oh. Yeah, and so customs, and then I merged the two of them, and then I was prime minister. So I led very big institutions nationwide, and public institutions, and I always knew that there were some things that I had to do in order for them to succeed and for the leadership to be efficient. And first, credibility. You have to have a credibility. And in order to have a credibility, you have to base in facts, you have to always say truth and a lot of integrity, and you could not have political bias because you lose immediately your credibility. You have to be fair. And you have to have a sense of justice. Then I said, okay, credibility is fine, but how do you build trust? And so I thought that meant to be a leader, a close leader, get engaged, get close to the people as much as I could, committed collaborators, young people that were truly brilliant, and a lot of predictability. You need that in order to build the kind of authority and the kind that the country, because the ombudsman really has always persuades, it doesn't legislate, But believe me that when the ombudsman spoke, the country listened. Yeah. And so I think that that's very hard. You have to be empathic with people. You have to have compassion. and you have to know how to prevent problems. Now, the thing is that I was kind of listened by the two sides, by the vulnerable people, by the, the indigenous people, the people with, and also by the investors, by the companies. They knew that I knew, and they came to me for advice, and I gave them the advice. Now, if you want, you do it. Or if you don't want to do it, you're going to ruin yourself, believe me. Because you need, before you have a market of consumers, you need to have a society of citizens. And if you have, people need to know their rights, and the rights have to be, fostered, strengthened, and you need people to understand that we are all the same. That's democracy, that's what it is. No abuse, no discrimination, no, and let everybody grow and let everybody get where they can have as hard as they work, and so on. But if you're not a credible person or you lead a credible institution, if people don't trust you, you're not going to get very far, believe me. Believe me, you're not going to get very far. And that is the first thing. And also, do not ever think that you are like some divine power person. No, not really. Get yourself surrounded by the best people. And particularly, yesterday when I was talking to my family about this conversation, they said to me, please tell those students something that is very strange in you. I said, what? They said, you like to be close to people that don't think like you. You hired people that are very smart and they don't think like you. And I said, did I do that? I said, yes, you did. and it's a very difficult relationship, but believe me, it makes you work. It makes you grow. Because it's like Alice from the other side of the mirror, so you're thinking, but you know the other side of the thinking. And in that, you become stronger. And you're more effective. You're more able to solve problems. That's what I think.
I actually want to transition to a discussion we were having upstairs in the Gladstone room. So we were talking about the fact that China is one of the largest, if not the largest investor in Peru. And we were talking about how you view China's role within Peru, but also adjacent to the US's role as well. A lot of people will say, because my background is actually researching Belt Road Initiative and Chinese investments. A lot of people on one side will say, well, Chinese investment leads to a debt trap. Then on the other hand, they'll say, well, that's been disputed, that's a myth. So how do you view...
What's a debt trap?
Debt trap as
I know what it is,
yeah.
but why a debt trap?
As in China's role in Sri Lanka, for example, right, with the ports, led to the fact that there was enough investments that Sri Lanka couldn't pay that back. So that's kind of what they mean by the debt trap. Yeah. So it's the inability for these countries to actually repay back a lot of the loans that they take from China. And of course, we hear that argument about the US as well. That's something that we hear from both. How do you view China's role in Peru?
Well, it has grown little by little, really. It didn't happen in a year or two. It's been growing, and there was a lot of U.S. investment in the 50s, in the 60s, and the last years of last century. In fact, I need to disclose, I went to a U.S. school. My elementary and my high school were in a U.S. school. That's where I learned my English. I'm sorry, I apologize to the English people because I know the American accent, but that's it. That's what I got. And then I went to a U.S. school as well, law school, and I worked for a corporation, a big U.S. corporation, a good one, by the way. And they came and they invested and they were there. And then suddenly, I don't know, maybe I think they lost interest or they looked at another part of the world or something. And then China started coming, slowly, quietly, respectfully. And first they went into fishing, and then they went to electricity, and then they were into mining. And in mining, they came with the Australians, for example, no, and people just received it. Some of the investments were a little, there was a reaction, but maybe 10%, 15% of it, because there's always a reaction against something. But I don't know. We have a very good relationship with the United States as well. I was the ambassador of the United States the other day, and she's very happy that the relationship between Peru and the United States is a very good time, So I don't see that conflict really. Now, there is a problem with that port, because the problem of that port is that it has the capacity for nuclear submarines. That is the problem. And it's a trade port, right? But I think that from the geopolitical, somebody asked me that question, that from the geopolitical, I don't think the Pacific Basin and all that, But on the other hand, what I know is that the big U.S. company now is trying to foster another port. And you know who is not very happy? Chile. Because now we're going to have two huge ports right at the Pacific Basin. But it's going to provide a lot of work, a lot of growth, and it's going to be good for the country. So I don't see I don't see as of today any threat of that magnitude. I think Peru is a solid, strong country. People in Bolivia today are saving in soles. That's the Peruvian currency. Can you believe that? They're saving in because it's a very stable. All the macroeconomic of the country are great. God bless the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Peru, who is, by the way, my friend. He has been, I think, with 10 presidents. I think he's the most important person in my country. And yeah, they have provided that stability. And now we do have other threats, security,
like
corruption.
What is the biggest threat that you view in Peru right now?
I think security.
You talked about terrorism upstairs. Can you expand on that?
Well, terrorism was before, it was when I was, when I decided to enter politics, particularly because we had we had a very aggressive terrorist bands there where they were defeated, and that provided also stability, the juridical stability, the safe and legal, and the economic stability. So the country grew for about 20 years, it grew. Now then we started all this disruption with politics, too many presidents in too few years, and we're entering now a period where we're going to have elections in a year and a half, and we all hope that it's going to be a good election.
Yeah, good luck.
Democratic and transparent, and that we get good candidates and we elect well. That's politics.
I want to talk a little bit about something that you mentioned. During Alan Garcia's presidency, you challenged the law and order discourse when you said we shouldn't fear mobilization as it means Peruvians are willing and able to realize their rights. It's the violence we must avoid. So how do you draw the line between mobilization and violence?
Oh, we all have the right to speak our minds and protest. Of course we do. I mean, I can't imagine a country that, not my country at least. And remember, I went to San Marcos University, the oldest in America, and if there's something that we're known for is protest. We were always in the forefront of the rights and so on. What we should always avoid and stop is violence. Because when there is a confrontation between the citizens, particularly the most vulnerable citizens, the poorest citizens and so on, and the police or the military or whatever, that is the recipe for disaster. Because sure enough, people are going to die. And there is nothing more important than the human life. Nothing. I mean, no matter what you think, no matter what your ideology is, there is no need for anybody to get hurt or even worse, to die. And that's one of the things that I fought for all my life, that our differences are discussed in dialogue, that we find answers in dialogue, that we avoid violence, because believe me, it is the poor people that pay that bill. Yeah. And it's awful, and it breaks my heart, and it always did. So you know what I did? I put my vest of the ombudsman, and I went and I sat in the middle. And I knew they were not going to shoot, because none of them would want to kill me. It was going to be in the papers all over the world. They killed the ombudsman. So at least, you know, I was always trying to pacify. And it's very funny because I'm not a particularly courageous person. You know, if a dog barks, I get, you know, scared or everything. But I never feared the people. Yeah. Never. I always knew that if you got close and you were empathic and you were ready to listen, they would relax and open up and talk. And we could find an answer, you know.
On that, we actually, I think particularly the past year and a half, have seen all types of mobilization and protest movements. You know, Latin America has one of the biggest Palestinian diasporas. We also see protest movements happening here in the UK. You have pro-Palestine protesters who climbed up the Big Ben Tower. Yeah, they did, to fly the Palestinian flag. We had someone actually, we had a couple of protesters occupy the Radcam Library, which is one of the most iconic libraries in Oxford. We have, even in Latin America, climate action protesters who will hang themselves over bridges, over railway lines. We'll have the Just Stop Oil protesters who blockade roads for campaigns for the ending of oil and fossil fuels. So how do you view that type of mobilization, and should their speech, I guess, be protected?
It's very difficult to answer that question because it's part of young people. They want to be heard, and they want to be respected, and they want their thinking to be heard. When I was young, it was the environmental people. I don't know, you might not remember, they went all over the place and put themselves in the ships and in the things and did all kinds of, and you know, but they did. At the end of the day, environment became something that everybody would want to listen to, right? So I fear for that because it's so sad that between human beings we cannot just sit and talk and listen to each other, empathic listening, you know. And I can't say which side is right or wrong. All I can say is all sides have the right to be listened, okay? As long as, of course, they don't kill somebody or you know, infringe on the law, because that's what, well, I'm a lawyer, but infringe, you know, or destroy property or something, no? But that happened in my country too, and particularly it happened through extractivism. And they would blockade, for example, they would blockade the roads, and people would die. Young children that were in the buses would die. And I said to myself, what? Even in wars, they would say, you know, the eldest, the pregnant women and the children go by. No, the protester wouldn't even let the eldest or the pregnant women or the children go by. And that is wrong. That is not human. You know, we need to understand that there's a human behavior where human dignity and human life is respected by everybody. And there is no superior value than that. And when the protest goes that violent, I think that's what's wrong.
So there has to be kind of a hard line, and yeah, that makes sense.
Which is there, no?
Yeah. So for one of our last questions before I let the audience ask, Peru has elections next year, and we did talk about it really briefly in our conversation, and the country seems to be kind of on the brink of political polarization. So what is your next move? What message can you convey to the youth of Peru in taking charge of their country instead of fleeing?
Well, that's basically what I said yesterday evening when I met with a group of Peruvians here, students there in Oxford. I said, look, you're carrying the torch now, and you just need to understand that you need to participate, or you're not going to have a country where to live. I belong to a generation that walked in and left our comfort zone, and believe me, it was a big comfort zone because I was a corporate tax lawyer. You know, how better can it get than that, right? But I don't regret it. And if I had to do it again, I would do it again. Because I am so happy that my country, I remember one day, I used to drive my car and stop in the red light, and when the red light was there, my heart was pounding because I didn't know if the car next to me was a bomb car, and I was going to die. And I started saying, oh my God, why? Until I saw the green light, and I could finally move, you know. And then, maybe 2 years later, I think, or 3, Pavarotti came to my city. And I was sitting there, like 2,000 people. And when I saw him, I said, oh my God, I thought this was never going to happen. You know, just the peace of art and this wonderful man singing for all of us, you know, and we sitting there peacefully and feeling safe. So that is what the young generation has to understand, that they have to build that world, a world where art, where culture, where literature, where movies, where, I don't know, parks and everything makes life of humanity better. And if there is one place in the world that we owe is Oxford, we humans, we owe Oxford. Because this was where the thinking happened. And this is where the change started. Maybe quietly, but it started. And I came, when I was invited, I came here with a real happiness of my heart.
We're very happy that you're here.
Because I was a young student and it never occurred to me that I was going to end up like a prime minister. Never, ever did it occur to me. But you might, any of all of you. But if I can just give you messages, you just have to do it yourself. If you don't do it, others will do it for the wrong reasons. To steal, to be corrupt, to be evil, to be mean. If you're here, it's because you're nothing of that. And when people say to me, how did you do it? I say, okay. I say, well, do you steal? I say, oh no. I say, well, just keep on the same thing. That's the same. I was like that when I was young, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, there's nothing strange. I think it's strange to steal. I think that the other behavior is the wrong, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I think.